how now in this stage of your life that you're currently in, do you kind of view this concept of longevity and being capable for as long as you can be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And
Dean Karnazes is one of the most iconic endurance athletes on the planet, a man who has redefined what the human body and mind are capable of. Known as the ultramarathon man, Dean has pushed beyond the limits of conventional racing, completing 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 consecutive days, running 350 miles nonstop, and competing in some of the most extreme environments on Earth, from Death Valley in 120-degree heat to the South Pole in sub-zero conditions. Dean is a New York Times best-selling author with the books like Ultramarathon Man and Run, where he shares not just stories of endurance, but lessons on discipline, resilience, and purpose. But what makes Dean different isn't just the miles, it is his mindset. His work is about tapping into something deeper, exploring human potential, embracing discomfort, and choosing to go when most people stop. Today, we're going to dive into Dean's mind, his mental toughness, and his longevity. So, Dean, I'm so glad you're here. It's an honor.
Thank you for the gracious introduction. I told you to embellish freely, and you took me up on it. Just make shit up, yeah.
Well, I would love to keep going for a little bit here on the Greece topic, because it is so fascinating. Not only is it fascinating that you're there and you're living there, I have read a lot of your work over the past and heard you speak several times. So I know that your mother is from that area, and it happens to be one of the blue zones, which is interesting with just how healthy your life has been, and her being from there and now you're back there. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of full circle. My grandparents immigrated from Greece to America around the turn of the 19th century, as many immigrants from Europe went to America to seek prosperity. And, two generations later, I came back to where they took off from.
And do you think some of the health and longevity you've experienced actually came down from stuff that your mom passed down to you throughout your life?
Yeah, I mean, both my parents are Greek. My dad is from the Peloponneso, so like where Sparta is located, and my mom is from this island that you mentioned called Ikaria, which is where Icarus. I don't know if you know any Greek mythology. You know the boy with the wax wings that his
Yeah.
dad made for him, and he flew too close to the sun. That's the island where he landed, Ikaria, and that's where his namesake. And I think there's a combination of things that go on there. One is the communities are really tight. I mean, it's like stepping back into the 50s for us. There's not a lot of cell phone reception. And these people are very neighborly. I mean, it's community more than individual households. So I think that's one of the factors. Also, they have no concept of time. I mean, they just do not pay attention to time, so they're never rushing. They're not hurried. When there's a saying on Ikaria, it's late 30. I'll be there by late 30. So, and as well as they eat from the land. So they harvest most of the food from the land. The soil is incredibly rich. That area is blessed with lots of sun and also lots of rain. So the soil is rich, the food is harvested, and they walk everywhere. I mean, Ikaria is the home of it has the highest concentration of centenarians on the planet. And centenarian is someone who lives to be 100. And I remember I was in a village and there was a lady that was there and she was 104. And they said she was very upset. And I said, why is she upset? And they said, well, she started a new business. She's making these fish nets. And she walked 5 kilometers down to the bank to get a loan. And the loan officer said, we have a policy at this bank. We don't lend money to people over 103. So she walked 5 kilometers back and now she got no financing. Yeah.
That is crazy. It's pretty wild. There's some recent studies that are starting to come out and they are indicating that like a individual that has a gluten, a celiac issue, or a lactose issue, they've ran some studies now where they've had that individual eat alone by themselves quickly in front of screens, and they can see where the celiac and lactose symptoms skyrocket. And then they can have that same person eat around a big table with a lot of community, a lot of laughter, and slow the pace of that eating down, and they find no celiac or lactose issues on the same meal. So the way that community and that laughter and that enjoyment creates longevity, and how Americans are very lonely and isolated right now, that's an interesting factor.
I couldn't agree more. And also wine. We hear so much about the ill effects of alcohol and how it's, poison and this and that. But you never see wine being consumed by an individual. It's always in a community setting, and it's festive. So it's slow sips. It's slowly, letting the alcohol warm your heart. But it's always in the context of a community, and a lot of times there's dancing afterwards. So it's very much different than someone just buying a bottle of wine and sitting at home, scrolling scrolling on Netflix or TikTok or whatever.
Yeah, the social factors connecting to longevity are extremely interesting, and that's a great part of running for a lot of people too, is running with several buddies, running with a handful of friends, training partners, but then just the whole social aspect that happens on race day, the pre-event festivities, the actual race, and then the post-event. It's a great social connector.
It is. I mean, I say that shared suffering brings people together. And, we see this in other contexts as well. I mean, you see it in warfare where bands of brothers, come together or in communities that are hit by hardship. I mean, look what's happening in some parts of the world, where there's war, and they all come together for a common cause. And, a marathon is warfare. It's a different form of warfare, but, it's you against you versus you against someone else. But everyone can relate. There's this sense of, they call it meta in the East, and that is it's like empathy for someone else. You can feel their suffering, and it's kind of like transmuted. And I think not only to the other runners, but to the spectators, which really surprised me. I remember finishing the New York City Marathon one day, and I was, it was kind of a New York moment. I'm walking down the street back to my hotel in one of those Mylar space blankets, and I ended up walking next to a lady, and I said, did you have a runner in the race? I thought maybe she was supporting a nephew or a friend. She said, no, I just go to spectate. I said, really? You just go to stand there for 5 or 6 hours and watch people run by? And she said, this is the greatest moment. I look forward to this all year. She said, I could stay there for 3 or 4 days and just watch these people. She said, it fills me with this energy that it's indescribable.
Wow.
And I never thought about that before, because I've always been running. I've never thought about the spectators and what it gives back to them.
The inspiration. Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I want to back up a little bit. I wanted to really grill in for a minute here on the moment you kind of started to veer away from kind of like the corporate normal life and create this whole entire new path, this unknown, this path less traveled, and what that kind of season of your life looked like, how you made that decision, the kinds of fears and social pressures you overcame to make that decision. Because obviously now, if you look back at your life, you've lived a phenomenal life full of so many grand adventures, and that wouldn't have been the case at all, looking at your life in reverse. If you would have taken a corporate America path, your life would have been much, much different. And many people get stuck right there in that moment of, should I go left or should I go right? And they get stuck because of the fear of the unknown. There's a lot of fear of financial provision. Like, am I going to be able to do this financially? And then there's usually friends and family members that start telling you that you're crazy, even people that you love the most. But you have to kind of overcome that to create this adventurous fulfilling, abundant life, and you've been able to do that. But what did that season really feel and look like when you were kind of navigating those decisions? 10 years ago, we kicked off the Backcountry Preseason Prep program. It was a straightforward 80-day program built from thousands of hours testing with dedicated backcountry hunters. Now, with a full decade of real results, we've completely rebuilt it into Preseason Prep 3.0. We've added more aggressive metabolic conditioning, smarter load progression, tougher mental finishers, and even better programming to help hunters build that unbreakable grit for high country, heavy packs, and long days in rough terrain. It is still the same mission, getting you stronger and mentally tougher for the backcountry. It's just taken to the next level after 10 years of honest feedback from hunters in the field. Preseason Prep 3.0 launches May 4th. If you are serious about this fall, it is worth checking out. Mountain Tough Podcast listeners always get 6 weeks for free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do to take advantage of that is use the code MOUNTAINPOD at checkout. That's MTNPOD on your monthly membership.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said something very poignant. The failure doesn't stop people. It's the fear of failure that stops them from even trying. So, my backstory is I loved to run when I was a kid. I mean, my earliest childhood recollections are running home from kindergarten. So I started running when I was 5 years old. I love running. I ran competitively up until I was a freshman in high school, and we won the league championships. And I thought, okay, that's as far as I'll ever take my running career. I thought that was a good place to end it. So I stopped running at 15. And then somehow I graduated from high school, and I got a degree in biochemistry, and then I got a graduate degree, and then I thought, oh, I need a business degree, so I got an MBA, and I landed a very comfortable corporate job in San Francisco. So I had a fat paycheck, I had a 401k matching program, stock options, a company car, free healthcare, all the perks that come with working for Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
And on the night of my 30th birthday, I was in a bar in San Francisco, doing what a lot of guys do on their 30th birthday. I was in there getting drunk. And at midnight, I told my buddies I was leaving, and they said, well, where are you going? The night is young. Let's have another round of tequila to celebrate your 30th birthday. And I told them, no, I'm going to run 30 miles to celebrate my 30th birthday instead.
Man, after
And they
drinking
looked
all
at me
night.
and they said, yeah, they said, you're not a runner, you're drunk. What are you talking about? And I said, yeah, I am, but I'm still going to do it. So I walked out of this bar, and I'll never forget, I didn't own running gear at the time, but I had on these comfortable like silk underwear, like silk boxer underwear. And I took off my pants and I just threw them down the alleyway, and I said, into the night, bro, and head south. So I knew there was a town called Half Moon Bay that was 30 miles away from San Francisco. So I just started stumbling drunkenly into the darkness, saying, run to Half Moon Bay. And, about 10 miles down the road, I started to sober up, and I thought, what the hell are you doing?
Man,
People do some really dumb things when they're drunk, and this is this is right up there.
yeah.
But something just felt right. Like I looked up and I saw the stars, and I was in pain, but I was also happy at the same time. And God kind of spoke to me and said, you're a runner. Like, you hate being a business guy. And I did. I hated getting out of bed in the morning. I was making a lot of money and I had a nice life and everything, but it wasn't that nice. And I was very unsatisfied, very unfulfilled. So I kept going, and I somehow, ran all night, got to Half Moon Bay, when the sun was rising, and decided at that point I was going to quit my job and become an ultra runner. And this was
Crazy.
1992, so
Crazy.
this is before all this gig economy even existed.
It is wild because when you did that, it was pre-social media, pre-smartphone, most of all the YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, any way to kind of start telling your story, at least, for those first 10 or 15 years of your story from that point on weren't being told, or were only being told once your book started coming out. That's kind of wild to think about now, with the difference in how people are documenting, some of their stuff, to not only document it, but to create a way to make a living off of it as well.
Yeah, it was very uncommon back then, because there weren't all these other channels you could pursue, to keep the lights on, put food on the table. So it was a little less straightforward. But I just knew that I loved to run. I love to run long distances, and I thought, all right, do what you love, and you're going to succeed.
Hmm.
Or at least if you don't succeed, you'll have tried. Because I had this vision of, turning 50, and sure, driving a red Ferrari, whatever, maybe being on my third or fourth wife, with a big belly, smoking a cigar. And I thought that is just not who I am. So, don't be that guy. Be the guy you want to be.
Yeah. And you ran the 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 consecutive days. I think it was in 2006. And what that really blew up and increased the popularity of you and people knowing who you were and what you were up to. But what was really happening in that 1992 to 2006 range? How were you kind of surviving? Were you still kind of trying to like navigate this new adventure, walking away from corporate America?
Yeah, there's a lot that is said about the lessons from athletics that translate to business, but just, the opposite, the lessons from business also translate to athletics, at least for me, because I was a business guy. So I kind of approached it as a business person would, and said, even if you win every ultra marathon you enter, you're still going to be, homeless, because you get a belt buckle. If you win, or if you come in last, it's the same thing for everyone. There's no prize money. So I thought there's got to be other avenues, you can go down to pay the bills. So I kind of, I started working with a company called the North Face,
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't even a running brand, but I said, hey, the whole trail scene, like, it makes no sense for us to have these big, heavy backpacks on, these big vibram-soled boots. We want to go fast and light. We want lighter packs. We want, more athletically inclined shoes. We want to move faster, get the heart rate up. And they kind of saw the vision. They said, well, let's make a running shoe that's specifically for the trails. And it was such a mind-blowing concept back then.
Man.
Wow, a shoe that only, like, you run only, it's like made for the trails. And so, and then, World Trail Running is gone from there. So I kind of rode a lot of the way, but hopefully I created a little bit of the momentum as well.
Wow, that's crazy to think about now. If you think about
Yeah.
just the dominance of marathons and ultra marathons and trail runs, and they've only gotten more popular in the last decade. It's you know when my wife and I were getting into ultra marathoning, that was very much inspired by you and your books. And so around the time that you started doing the storytelling around 50 states, 50 marathons, 50 consecutive days, we were starting our kind of running career and our running chapter. We were about 26, 27, and you really were a big part of that inspiration. We started with road marathons, and then we ended up doing a marathon a month for a year, kind of based off of your model. And a lot of that was, we live in Montana, so we're always looking for the runs that are actually in the mountains. Where are the ultra marathons at? And in those days, 2007, 8, 9, 10, the longest ones generally you're going to find in most Western states was the 100-miler. And you had, a lot of the 50Ks, a lot of the 50-milers, and then the state might have 100-miler somewhere. And then we just keep pushing the limits. We keep pushing the limits as humans, as a species, as a human performance industry. The 250 milers that are more common now. You see a lot now in the last 5 years of just 48 hours max endurance. How far can you go on a lap, on a loop? But the embracing of kind of you being at the spearhead of that moment of pre some of those North Face conversations, it was just people backpacking through the mountains. And now if you look at it now in 2026, people are running through mountain ranges all over the world, very lightweight with hardly any gear, on tops of peaks all over. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's exploded. And, around the time where I ran 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days, there really wasn't anything like that. I mean, there was the standard 100 miler, like you said. There was the Badwater Ultra Marathon that was 135 miles, and there were a lot of marathons. So to do something off the race course, kind of conceiving your own adventure, like this 50 marathons in 50 states and 50, like it was travel, it was all kinds of things coming together. I think that kind of gave permission for other people, like, I'm going to try this. I'm going to run all the way across Montana. Like, I'm just going to run across the state. Trying all these different sort of things. Then the FTKT thing, started kicking off, and now there's so many permutations. I mean, like you said, there's single stage 250-mile races. I've done a number of multi-day, like 6-day races that are stage races across like the Gobi Desert, the Atacama.
Yeah.
So they're all kinds of races for and also for every like ability level. A lot of them are more approachable. I mean, I ran 100K in Australia. It was a tough 100K, but they also had a 50K, and the cutoff for the 50K was 24 hours. And I mean, it was runnable. It wasn't like you were scrambling up scree fields or anything. It was all runnable, but I couldn't believe how many people in their 60s and 70s were part of that race because they wanted to do a 50K. They had their packs on, they might catnap along the way. There was great food along the way, and they had 24 hours to do it. So it brought out a whole, different sort of demographic. And I just love this kind of experimentation to see where people's interests are.
Yeah. I've noticed that if the gear you're using isn't reliable, it's much easier to back off early and quit. GoRuck's products hold up, and at Mountain Tough, rucking has become an essential aspect of our programming. Rucking combines cardio and resistance training, burning up to 3 times more calories than regular walking while strengthening your joints with very little impact. It also boosts VO2 max, bone density, and it makes it an efficient, science-backed way to improve overall fitness. The Rucker 4.0 is purpose-built for rucking, featuring elevated plate pockets to keep weight high and stable reinforced construction. GoRuck is offering 20% off their products for Mountain Tough Podcast listeners. All you need to do is use code Mountain Tough Community. That's MTNTOUGH Community when checking out at GoRuck.com. All right, back to work. Did you go through a season where it was like everyone thinks I'm crazy, everyone thinks I'm weird, I'm just kind of struggling, and then all of a sudden, like, your New York Times best-selling books come out, and everyone knows who you are, knows what you're up to, is kind of embracing you? Was there kind of like this light switch moment where it was like, oh wow, people are kind of like finally catching it on to the message I'm preaching?
Yeah, I never really, I didn't go out, like, it wasn't a prescriptional book. Like, I wasn't going to tell people how to, live their life or give them life lessons. I'm not that kind of guy. I mean, I like storytelling. And if a life lesson comes through in the story, so be it. But when I wrote my first book, I mean, I just wanted to write a book. It was kind of like on my life list of the proverbial bucket list. I wanted to jump out of an airplane. I wanted to swim with sharks, eat sushi, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write a book. So I wrote this book, and it was all about ultra marathon. It was storytelling around these ultras I did. And I thought, okay, I wrote a book. If 5 of my buddies buy this book, I'll be lucky. And it became, like you said, this instant New York Times bestseller. And the people I was getting messages from were not hardcore ultra marathoners. The hardcore ultra marathoners, like, yeah, come on, Dean, we know these stories. Like, we're in these same races with you.
Yeah.
But it was people that weren't runners or even marathon runners, half marathon runners, just thought, oh my God, I've never heard of this before. Like, the things people are doing, I didn't know existed, and they found it really empowering. Even non-runners said, my God, your book, what you're doing is so uplifting, and it's really motivated me. So I thought, there's power in ultramarathoning to the masses, and not even the running masses, just the people that want, like, to see the best of the human form being pushed to its limit. And I still believe that.
Yeah. I mean, the way you were inspiring a generation, inspiring multiple generations kind of from that moment it was a catalyst event. It was a catalyst event, certainly in like American history, maybe global history, but the catalyst of you getting that book out into the market, it changed the perspective of so many people's self-limiting thoughts because, before that book, people would be stuck in a self-limiting thought that, it's just impossible for them to run a half marathon or multiple half marathons in a year. And then just going through that gave them the inspiration that really anything is possible that they want to go after. And it kind of was that moment of, running history where no one had ever broke the 4-minute mile, and then someone does it, and then all of a sudden it creates this opportunity for thousands of other people to do it. It's like we needed someone to tell us that anything is possible, and your book did that for a generation, and that just sparked this fire, which is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly like an inflection point. And once that book came out, then there was a flame I might have started, but there's a lot of kindling being added. I mean, Born to Run, Christopher's book came out,
Mm-hmm.
huge success.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, Goggins came out, and it
Mm-hmm.
just is kind of continuing to blow up this message. So, I've been part of this, lifting tide, rising tide that's kind of lifting all the ships. But yeah, I might have been, one of the pinnacle moments just at that first book when it came out. And that book is in print in like 21 languages. And, my life has become really weird because when I go to these international events, all these elite runners from different countries, they don't really know each other because, running still is not so much of a global thing, but a lot of them have read my book. So they all know me. So, I get all these people coming to me from all around the world at these events as though we're friends. When you read someone's book and it's kind of intimate,
Yeah.
you can relate to this person. Like you kind of feel like you're part of their life. So, having to deal with this, and see this weird dynamic has been, it's helped me grow as a human. Like I've had some, interpersonal growth in ways I never could have dreamed of before this book came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is super interesting component of it because all over the world, if you travel for a race, you only know the people you traveled there with. You don't know the others that are there. I I've heard you talk a few times that you're not even sure how many marathons you've done at this point. We know that it's somewhere between 500 and 1,000. You've put a lot of miles on, a tremendous amount of miles. Not only that volume of races and events, and that's just not marathons. That's ultra marathons and beyond. The amount of training time that it's taken to do all of that, and I know in a lot of seasons of your life, you were racing so much, the race was a training event for the next race, but you were still putting in a lot of miles throughout the week. Now, how are you viewing that when it comes to, this topic of longevity and impact and guys wanting to be capable in their 60s, 70s, 80s and not, beat up their joints too much, but then you want guys to be running in their 30s, 40s, and 50s and kind of pushing those limits. How now in this stage of your life that you're currently in, do you kind of view this concept of longevity and being capable for as long as you can be?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and I thought one day I'm going to count all the medals and trophies I have because it's like you said, it's over 300 just regular road marathons, and then I don't even know how many ultra marathons, how many Spartan races, obstacle course races, how many triathlons. I mean, how many adventure races? I've done so many endurance sports,
Mm-hmm.
and longevity and doing this until I say my finish line's a pine box is a big goal of mine. And a lot of the guys I ran with, my contemporaries don't run anymore because they're just they have bone on bone and everything else.
Yeah.
And And then, it's funny because you're hearing a lot about age group records of people in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Most of these people didn't start running until they're 50 or 60. Like they started late, so they still had some of their joints. It's rare to see someone like me that, has been doing this for 35 years at a pretty competitive level. I've probably done already this year 8 or 9 races, a
Hmm.
couple marathons, a couple ultra marathons, a 48-hour race. So
Wow.
even more so than before, it's for me, it's like race, recover, work out a little bit, taper, and race again. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of saving what I've got left for the big efforts in the race course. But that said, I'm also working out, cross training like crazy, keeping my muscles developed because you really do lose muscle mass as you age. Even me. I mean, it used to be I wouldn't even need to go into the gym and I'd be kind of bulky.
Hmm.
Now I got to put in some hard time in the gym. And now if I want to run, a sub 4 hour marathon, a sub four, which is not fast, but I got to go do the work. I got to get on the track and do some pretty hardcore interval training. So my speed is definitely decreased. My endurance has increased. So
Hmm.
I still win almost every race I'm in my age group, but no one cares about who's winning their age group except people in your age group. So, I'm still competitive there, but I spend definitely a lot more time cross training, strength building than I do just running the base mileage nowadays.
And how old are you this year?
Oh, I could be your grandfather. I think I'm going to be. Well, when you ask my age, though, let's clarify. Do you mean my chronological age or my biological age?
You both. Yeah. How are you feeling about both of those numbers?
Yeah, my chronological age is I'm going to be 64, and last time I was tested, I was 42, my biological age.
Dang, that is awesome. For more than a century, America's sportsmen and women have led the way in paying for the restoration of wildlife, conserving habitat, and investing in the future of our natural world. This is a legacy built not on what we take ourselves, but on what we give back. That's the nature of conservation, paying it forward for the next generation. This is the reason Mountain Tough is a proud partner of Wild Sheep Foundation, an organization committed to keeping and putting wild sheep on the mountain. If you're not already a member, learn more today at wildsheepfoundation.org. How do you feel about some of these questions then when it is, the questions around, should I be running this much? I don't want to have bone joint issues when I'm older. Or, you see the reverse of that question a lot of, I'm not built to be a runner. Should I even be out there running? Now, from your viewpoint, how do you kind of help people navigate those topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that wherever your desire is, your passion is, I think you should follow that. I mean, I think probably the worst thing that we do, and I do as well, is run a hard marathon. I think running for that distance is hard at a almost all out effort is really damaging. I think running fast for shorter distances, maybe a 5K, or running slow for long distances, like 100 miles through the mountain, are
Mm,
much more healthy than running 26.2 on pavement just at a all out effort.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
would say choose your races as well. And you know, the shoes. I mean, I've run 200-mile road races in North Face trail shoes with almost no cushioning. So footwear has come such a long way, and with plated shoes now and everything, and Hoka's. I mean, these big cushiony shoes. It's going to be interesting to see, like, are we seeing fewer age-related industries or overuse injuries from these sort of shoes versus the older style shoes? But I suspect that just the landing is so much more soft in these cushiony shoes that it probably has some joint protection advantages as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that race topic is a great one. I mean, the road marathons, the impact that you feel after those, it is night and day difference, just how banged up, beat up, how sore you are, how tired you are for a longer period of time compared to a trail race. And just, the trail race taking you up and down, and you have incline, you have decline, you have parts that are so steep you have to hike, not run. And then even the difference of like some sandy gravel and how that actually absorbs a lot more of the impact than that pavement can be a substantial game changer.
Yeah, and also, about 5 years ago, I discovered poles. So I always used to discount poles.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, come on, that's not real running. But now, if a race allows poles, and I'm talking about mountain races, I definitely use poles, and I can see the advantage. I mean, I'll win my age group a couple rungs lower than me when there's poles allowed because I do have good arm strength, and I train in the gym for using poles. So I really leverage the poles both to take the impact off my joints, but also just to propel myself, with your arms as well. It's almost like a different sport, and I don't think it should be. I think there should be a different category, like certain races, like Western states, like the classic races, they don't allow poles,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. But for races that allow poles, I think there should be two divisions because some people say I just don't want to run with poles. I don't like it. I don't train with them, but I think they're at a disadvantage than someone who trains and knows how to use poles.
Wow. Yeah. Because you're getting all that arm leverage and propulsion for sure. All right. So with like what you just mentioned, the difference between your chronological age and your biological age, almost having that 20-year gap there, like biologically, the testing is saying that you're in your 40s. What else is kind of like a go-to for you when it comes to this like topic of biohacking? Most people are going to think of sauna, cold plunge, supplements, recovery, diet. What are the things that for you have actually worked and are working?
I don't think there's one thing. People say, what's your secret? I don't think there's one secret. I think it's everything you do. I think it's looking at your life through the lens of trying to be the best animal that you can be. So that means obviously your training, your cross training, your diet, your sleep habits. I mean, sleep is hugely important. So trying to optimize all of those. For me, Hippocrates said, the founder of medicine, basically of ancient medicine, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So I think that first of all, the food we eat really matters. And I eat, I like to say, if I can't pick it from a tree or dig it from the earth or catch it with my hands, I don't eat it.
Mm.
So I try to avoid anything packaged or processed or refined, anything in a bag. If it comes from a plant, eat it. If it's made in a plant, don't. So I think that, if you can eat foods that are real, also, being in Greece, the olive oil here is amazing. So, having a lot of really good, high quality monounsaturated fats
Mm-hmm.
from good sources like, olives from ancient trees is helpful. So I think it's everything. I think, stress management is huge. I also think that having social connections, and that's one thing you mentioned I've kind of been spending more time in Greece.
Yeah.
I feel so much more connected here, even though I have a lot of friends in California, but everyone seems to be busy and kind of in their own hemisphere, in their own,
Yeah.
on their own path. And once in a while we connect, and we have a great time when we connect. But in Greece, it's different somehow. And the Greek culture is older. I mean, in America, if something's 200 years old, it's ancient. In Greece, I mean, if something's 2,000 years old, it's not even that old. So they've been living together for a long time, and they've kind of refined the art of living with other people and how to perfect that. So I think that America is still very like an infant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a bratty infant. There's a lot of infighting, and we just haven't quite figured out how to all get along. And I hope that that time comes, but it's probably going to be after my lifetime. Yeah.
Mountain Op supplements keep you going steady. I've personally been on their Yeti pre-workout for clean energy without jitters, and their Hydrate to stay topped off during long days when you need those electrolytes. Creatine and protein are a staple for me for building and bouncing back. Plus, They have no junk, just real fuel. It's simple, reliable stuff that helps you push when it counts. Get 20% off Mountain Ops supplements at mountainops.com using code MOUNTAINTOUGH. That's MTNTOUGH. All right, now back to work. And I know you have a passion for letting other people experience and see Greece. I know you have a deep passion for the history, and I know you have a deep passion for the marathon and inviting people over to run that marathon and experience Greece through the running of that marathon. And that happens every year in November. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's always the second weekend of November. So it's New York City is always the first weekend. I mean, this is how I remember time. It's based on different races, that's like a benchmark. But yeah, New York is the first weekend and Athens the second weekend of November.
And what makes that experience so special? Why should everyone kind of view that as a bucket list marathon, especially if they're a runner?
Well, it was, where the original marathon was run. It's where marathoning, was born in 490 BC. So that, the tours I do, running the marathon is just one day of that. We also do like historical, cultural things. So I call it foot tourism. We basically explore Greece on foot. So we get to places that are off the beaten path, that tourists don't go to or don't know about, and you get exercise as well. And it's called Greek running tours, but let's face it, we're shuffling, we're stopping a lot for for photos, for souvlaki, for
Mm-hmm.
ouzo, and then we're running in between. But basically, it's seeing Greece on foot. And for a marathoner to know the history of their undertaking gives it like a new, more powerful meaning, because the marathon is like unlike any other sport. I mean, the origin story, 490 BC, a foot messenger, heroic battle. He dies at the end. I mean, it's just the stuff of lore.
Yeah.
No other sport has an origin like that. I mean, sure, basketball's gotten interesting. Golf, sure, it's in the Highlands of Scotland and in the 1700s, but this is 490 BC and a foot messenger, running that great distance, and we're doing the same thing on a city street, and it's just, I don't know, the people that come and take this tour, they are just they want to, yeah, it gives just completely new dimension to the undertaking of running a marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have biblical stuff over there with Corinth, and then it's not an easy marathon either. It's not one that someone is just going to go over there and crush. You got the hilly country of Athens. So it sounds incredible.
Yeah, there's really in Greece. There's no there's nothing flat here. Yeah, no, the marathon is an ass kicker. Don't come here thinking you're gonna, it's gonna be a BQ. You're not gonna qualify for Boston at Athens, and you're not gonna set a PR. I mean, it's a slow course, and it's a grind. But you finish in an ancient stadium. I mean, this you finish in it's called Kali Marmaro, so it's a marble stadium that's been there since ancient times, and
Mm.
just when you make that final turn, I always joke with my buddies that are big marathoners, because they said, "Oh, Boston Marathon. I don't know if you ever run, but like you come around the final corner and you see the City Go sign there glowing in the background. City Go is like it's like it's a petrol company.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's great. Yeah, in Athens, you come around the last corner, you see the Acropolis up, and and they're like, oh God, you just can't compare it. I mean, there's the Acropolis, and my God,
Yeah.
your knees buckle, and you get the chills. I mean, it is so powerful. That finish shoot.
Unreal. Unreal. Is that one that you have to register early or you're not going to get in, kind of like a New York thing? Or is it difficult to get into that one?
It never used to be, but the World Athletics Organization just announced that Athens is going to be their first standalone marathon in 2023. So that was just announced. So now that they made this announcement, I think now Athens is on a lot of people's radars. I mean, a lot of people didn't even realize Athens was the first marathon,
Mm.
which is sad. It's not, I mean, it's not a major marathon, which, I kind of like think that's an oxymoron. I mean, it's the original. How could it not be a major marathon? I mean, but anyway, I think it was fairly easy to get into. It didn't sell out that quickly. in the past, but I think starting this year, it's going to sell out pretty quickly just because of that big announcement.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll increase that popularity. Man, for you, it's got to be wild, like looking back at life in reverse now. And not only has running been this incredible thing for you, but the way that running has created an ecosystem for you to travel the entire globe and see the entire globe. I mean, there's not many places you haven't been on Earth, and running was the thing that took you there. So like the adventure and the travel and the places you've been and the people you've met, all just because of this thing of putting on your shoes and going out for a run. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah, no, I've been on all seven continents twice, and I still can't process what you said is absolutely right. All through running, I've traveled the world. I've met incredible people. I've seen incredible things. I've experienced the globe. I consider myself a global citizen. I've had food from around the world, all in a very positive sort of way. I mean, running is it's empowering to a lot of people. I mean, like even running down, this ancient Silk Road in Kyrgyzstan. People drive by you and they smile. There's something about just seeing a human out there kind of just suffering on their own will, but giving it their all. It
Mm-hmm.
just brings happiness to people. So it's a very happy undertaking, both for the runner, well, not always for the runner, but for the bystander watching. There's just something about running that's so raw and real. It unites people.
What's up, guys? Dustin here. As you know, good music in the gym for your workouts can change everything. The right music allows you to flip that switch and keep pushing when you need a breakthrough. We've been running the Turtle Box speakers for a while now, and these things are waterproof, tough, loud. These things are built like a tank. The Turtle Box Ranger is great if you're on the move. The original covers most days, and that's what you see around here. And the new Turtle Box Grande puts out some serious volume for big spaces. Check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Well, in closing here, Dean, can you kind of walk me through the hardest, most difficult event you've ever put your body through? And could you kind of walk me through that from a perspective of how you handle the topic of mental toughness and how you think about like mindset overcoming the physical pain?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many races where I've been at a point where I thought you can't go. I mean, this is just impossible. I mean, there was a 6-day race I did across the Atacama Desert, self-supported, so you had to carry everything you needed for 6 days. And at night it was below freezing, and during the day it was above 100 degrees. And you're sleeping on the ground, in a tent.
Hmm.
Um, you're so dehydrated, you're so spent. I remember being on a mountain ridge in Patagonia during this really tough 100-miler in this sleet storm with this driving crosswind, and just seeing this dark chasm to the right. Thinking if you get blown off of this, I don't know how far down you're going. But I always come back to the same place, and that is just don't think, execute.
Hmm.
Just take your next footstep to the best of your ability, and your next footstep. So don't think about anything about the future. Don't reflect on the past. Just focus on your next footstep, then your next footstep. And that takes some mental discipline. I mean, even when things are really tough, our minds are so hyperactive. I
Yeah.
mean, we're
Yeah.
thinking, I mean, even as we're having this conversation, you're probably thinking, I got to wrap this up. I got to go pick up my son from school. Did I feed the dog this morning? A thousand things. So to quiet your mind somehow and just say, all that matters to me is taking my next footstep and my next footstep. It's really a technique that will get you through anything.
Hmm.
But you need to, again, to work on it, because it takes some mental discipline to let thoughts that are coming into your mind other than your next footstep just pass through like clouds.
Hmm.
Like, just it's a cloud passing through. You don't engage in the cloud. You don't let it rain on you. Just let it pass through, and you focus on your next footstep.
Wow. So good and so true. I mean, living in the present moment is the magic, and staying anchored in the present is where life really is actually happening, even though it is difficult, especially, a lot of us men are going to really struggle with thoughts being out in the future, with, trying to solve problems that don't exist yet. And when that happens in an environment of like pain and suffering, that's when you can really crash and burn, because you think about the canyon you have to go through tomorrow, right now in the present moment. It's not something you need to be thinking about yet, because you just don't know how that's going to actually play out, or the shame of the past. Not only is that like an incredible principle to navigate a hard endurance event, it's actually the same incredible principle that we really need to just navigate life in general, of can we anchor back to the present and get out of these thoughts of the past or the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no more powerful driver of anxiety than thinking about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard someone say that something like 98% of your worries about the future never happen. So we're worrying about all kinds of things. We're trying to plan, and you're right, it derives the enjoyment of the present moment of time. I think that's one thing the Greeks have mastered, is that they're never beyond, no matter how bad it is, you're saying, fuck it, I'm gonna have a shot at Uzo, let's
Mm-hmm.
dance. It was like Zorba the Greek. I don't know if you ever saw that movie,
Yeah.
but just his business went to shit, everything went to shit, and he just said, let's have some Uzo, let's dance. And you could tell they just were so absorbed in that moment, it didn't matter.
Mm.
Nothing mattered except that moment of beauty. So I
Wow.
think that's one thing. Yeah, the Greeks have really figured that one out. Yeah, they cracked the code on being in the present.
Yeah. Being in the present is special and magical. And, the more that you can kind of do it, the more that you can find yourself getting into that zone, into that spot. It almost is like a muscle where if you're not training it, it's going to be hard at first. It's going to be difficult for you to shut those thoughts off. Extremely difficult. Like there's an exercise where it's like, all right, I want you to be in this present moment. So I just want you to count the inhale as a 1 and then count the exhale as a 2, and just see how high you can get that count without another thought interrupting that pattern. And when you try that at first, like it's hard to make it to 7, like 7 breaths in and out before an outside thought comes in. And the more you practice, you see that number going up and going up and going up. And then you start to feel that peace of turning those emotions off, turning those thoughts off. But listeners should know it is truly where life happens, but it also needs to be trained. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I read somewhere that the average attention span of an adult in the U.S. is 7 seconds, and a goldfish has an attention span of 10 seconds. So, but
Uh,
yeah, I mean, these are ancient principles. Even Plato wrote about coming out of the cave. He thought people that were so caught up in there's a word called halia in Greek. That's the bullshit of living, of getting through the day, that they never saw the light. Like their life was never really lived. So the cave and the light was a metaphor he used. People that were like self-actualized, that rose above that and realized what you just said, that living in the present moment is actually living, and being so self-occupied with all these other thoughts is the cave. It's like a dark hell.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful. Well, Dean, I appreciate you jumping on. It's been an honor and a privilege to chat with you and hear how you're doing and catch up. I love what you're up to, and you living over there in Greece most of the year and kind of continuing to pursue your passions of running and the history and the tours, and sharing that with people is special. You've been a huge inspiration in the life trajectory that I've gotten to live. So much of what you wrote about changed my life, and those changes, created this ability to impact and inspire a lot of people through the Mountain Tough story. And, so the catalyst that you did, the ripple effects that it's created, who knows how many ripple effects out there, but it is numerous and countless. So I appreciate you a lot, a ton.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed the conversation, and next time let's go running.
Yeah, let's
That'd
do
be
it.
even better.
That
Yep.
would be better. I know you got me really fired up about checking out the Athens marathon and what it would take to get over there.
Yeah, and just drop me a note if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dean. Appreciate you.
Enjoy your day.